Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from a very warm, humid, and very still evening at Durnford. It's good fishing weather. I'm not going to be fishing today, unfortunately. Are you going to be fishing, Jan?
No, I'll probably go home after this.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce you, Jan Szagowski. Some of you may have met him already because he's been part of the entomology team in Open Days, but some of you may have not. So I met with Jan in 2007, I believe. I joined in 2006, and I think it was above the Sleeper Bridge at West Amesbury.
Yep, it was.
Jan, we became good friends, very good fishing friends. We have fished a number of rivers together, not only chalk streams, but spate rivers as well. So we felt that it's a good way to share our experiences. It's difficult to try and explain that every time that we're out there, we fish the same river, but it's a different river, and conditions change. The fly hatches change sometimes within the day. So Jan has been a member of our committee, and he has been very active on the water quality front. He has been driving the river fly monitoring when we started back in 2009, I believe it was.
It was 2015.
2015. No, that was we had started the river fly monitoring
Yes.
before, but 2015
Oh, I see,
was
yes.
the fingerprinting.
Yes.
And then he is a qualified instructor. He's done quite a few workshops on entomology, practical entomology, and we'll talk about why practical entomology. And yeah, it's a case of sharing our experiences rather than telling you how to go about these things. So I'd like to pass over to Jan to tell us the story. So Jan, how did you get involved? What was the reason? What is behind
getting into
how to-
entomology?
Yeah.
And actually, right, one of the
Yeah.
biggest things for me was that I really didn't have any appreciation of the actual flies I was using. I knew some of the names, etc., but I probably lacked quite a bit of knowledge as to rivercraft, if you like, that comes from it. I'm also a bit sort of science oriented. I mean, it's mainly if you like, maths, physics, and chemistry, and not necessarily the biology side and insects. But very importantly, I needed to feel that I could understand better what the environment was going to be, and that would probably improve my chances of catching fish.
So it was because you wanted to catch more fish.
A little bit, yep.
Okay. Do you want to take over and
Okay,
tell us about I'm just going to load a small presentation, and Jan is going to take us over.
Okay,
there we go. And I will be interjecting with some questions, if I may.
Yep, no worries. Okay.
So how to choose the right fly?
How to choose the right fly? Right. For the very first thing, we don't need to know the Latin names of flies to actually catch the fish.
Thank you for that.
What we do need to know is we need to be able to identify them. And if we can identify the fly that is actually being taken by the fish, we've pretty got a 80% of the way of completing the task and actually catching it. So let me see, let's go to the next one. Why do we need to know what fly is hatching? Essentially, it's because of the integral part of the whole chalk stream experience that we have. The definition of a chalk stream experience is basically to use the artificial fly from a reasonable representation in size and outline of the insects upon which the trout are likely to be feeding. This is part of what we have in our book under the chalk stream etiquette, etc. So you need to know what the fly is. You need to know what to identify it, and then you need to know how to um, present it so that you get the best chance of actually following the whole process of a chalk stream experience. Most to actually get a complete view of it, then there's Gordon Mackey has a little part in our book that tells us how to start at the bottom and go through to the top of the beat. Casting upstream, of course. If you have people casting downstream and upstream at the same time, you're going to have tangles and all sorts of things. So there's some practical limitations in that. Also, you're coming up from behind the fish in the first place, which means that your stealth is much more, shall we say, efficient. And of course, anything that does go wrong behind the fish is less likely to scare it than in front.
And this is something that we covered with John as well. It's very important how we approach the chalk stream fishing, particularly during the busy periods when you've got mayflies and a lot of anglers. Yeah, it is the traditional way of approaching it. And did you want to say anything about the traditional way that we view what does it mean? I mean, for the members that weren't able to join the open day, and we had our president who opened up.
Oops. Yeah, go on. Yes. If it's the traditional way of fishing in a chalk stream, hang on, let me go back a bit. Yeah, it's a very unique environment that we have, and this chalk stream experience is to do with how you catch the fish. It's not how many.
Yeah.
It's not match fishing. It's a particular way that you identify a fish that's in position, in station. You can see it's ready to feed, and therefore you can then cast to it, hopefully that you've identified the right fly, and then catch it and then admire it.
So it's a light fishing approach.
Yes.
In other words, minimizing effort, acting as a stalker rather than casting all the time, aiming to catch a fish in an opportunistic way.
Absolutely. It's less is more in this instance. You don't want to be, doing too much disturbance.
Okay.
Probably 2 or 3 casts of stuff. That then the fish will start to get spooky.
So knowing the life cycle is important.
Definitely. I think that the thing about that is how do you know when you want to go to fish and what the most prime times are. I mean, knowing the life cycle of the fly itself helps determine the right time, the right place, and the right fly, because obviously if you see it, it takes the fly, and you can identify what fly that is. Right, that's exactly the highest percentage of success you're likely to get.
Okay.
Okay. All right. This is solving a problem. Basically, when you see what fly is it taking. So one of the things that we need to probably understand in the first place is that brown trout tend to feed on particular natural foods, even though there's a wider selection available. And what that means is you can have 4 or 5 different flies coming off, but it'll pick one. And as an example of how this feeding pattern of being selective works, if you read the book The Fly by Andrew Hurd, he says that when the German and the English started to populate America with the brown trout, they found that the Americans couldn't catch them as well as they could their local fish, and they hadn't realized that the cutthroats and the rainbows will basically hit anything if it's put in front of them. What then happens is that the brown trout itself will be, if it's been caught a couple of times on that particular fly or that insect, it's then more sensitive to it. It has something in it that is a DNA that says, okay, you may have the biggest flies. You may have the tastiest flies, but apart from that, it chooses something else. That's the way it is. And that's very specific to the brown trout.
So it's still the case, I would presume, that cutthroats, I haven't fished for cutthroats, certainly rainbows, I found them more aggressive, but that will be the case nowadays as well.
Yes,
Couldn't it?
definitely. Yeah, I think it's the thing is, it's in the no one. I don't think anyone can actually scientifically prove why they go into the selective mode, but it's definitely in their DNA that they will go through this process and be very, very selective.
So what we're saying, an approach, and I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, an approach that would be you go to a renowned tackle shop, or you go into the internet and you get a selection of flies, and then you start randomly testing them out on the day. That ain't gonna crack the code necessarily.
No, not necessarily. However, that they will catch fish, but they've got to be at the right conditions for the fly that you bought in the shop for that to happen. Because it's a natural environment, these things change throughout the day, as you know, like the weather and everything else. And the thing about our chalk stream fishing is that it's purely environmental. We are not doing anything really man-made. I know the rivers are man-made in terms of the way that they've been manipulated over the years, but effectively when we go, what are we doing? I mean, unless we overstock and unless we actually use baits or other forms of food items to the fish to control their feeding habits, we're stuck with an environmental situation. And that in itself is the problem, and that is what's good about chalk stream fishing, is that we have a problem every day we go to sort out, can we figure out how to catch the fish or not.
And I suppose you might want to give us one or two examples where you've been fishing and you have seen a number of flies hatching, and it so happens that possibly on that day fish they locked on a particular species. Can you give us
I can,
one or two
yeah,
examples?
okay. For anyone that knows Romsey, if you come down the Stockbridge Road into Romsey, there is a small carrier running through that goes actually into the town. There used to be a garden centre there that sold fish, etc., etc. And I think it's Charlie Dimmock was the gardener woman there. If I was fishing there, this is going back years ago, and the mayfly were there, and they were all spent spinners, and they were just in little rafts, maybe 10 together, maybe 100 that were spinning round in the various flows and stuff. You could see sometimes little movements where trout or chub or whatever would come up and take something. Now it's pretty obvious to me that there was not an issue here. On went a spinner, a mayfly spinner, cast to where I saw the last rise, nothing. Cast again, cast again. In fact, the act of doing that probably put the fish down to a certain extent. So for me, I didn't know what to do. You couldn't have gone wrong with a mayfly spinner. I mean, all the conditions and everything was telling you this is what you had. Happened to notice that there were some midges flying around. Well, I put on a size 16 black midge, blow me down after 3 or 4 casts. It took. So why, you could say to yourself, is why do you think that they took it? They're sated with mayfly, but they still took the black gnat. And it was obviously what it needed to have.
I've got an example which I need to share because it is, I suppose, a unique, my unique experience. We were fishing one summer evening with a member above Allenby Bridge in West Amesbury, and we were aiming to catch fish on a blue wing olive spinnerful. And of course, after about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, it was getting darker. You could see the first spinners on the water. And I was fishing on the true right bank, being right-handed, and the other member was fishing on the true left bank. And we noticed that fish were feeding in a strange way. Some of the fish that I was casting, they would take in the blue wing olive spinner or the red spinner, and some of the fish they wouldn't take it, they weren't interested. Equally, on the left-hand side where the member was fishing, he was catching fish using a sedge imitation, a small elk hair, size 16. So it was a bit perplexing because on both sides, some of the fish were choosing, I want blue wing olive, the other one said, no, I want a sedge. I remember that the next morning, Dr. Cyril Bennett, he sent me a photograph, and he had been there earlier, and he had photographed one of these sedges, and in fact, it's called the small silver sedge. Do you want the Latin name? Because I've got this thing.
Go for it.
Lepidostoma hirtum. There you go.
There you go.
And they've got a similar egg ball, which is attached on their abdomen, the back of their abdomen, and they're dropping the ball in the same way like blue wing olives. So what was happening was, it hasn't happened. I hadn't experienced that thing. You do not normally see sedges dropping their eggs and then floating downstream. So we all did well, but that was an example that you've got some fish choosing type A food, some fish choose type B. So it's a buffet at the end of the day.
Indeed. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, if you can perform a structured process of identification, you will arrive at the correct fly sooner rather than a search through a random search through your fly box, unless you're lucky.
Are you lucky?
Well, this is it. Let me give an example of this. This is going off topic a bit, but it's golf. And Gary Player, I think, had won one of the Masters or the Open or something, and he chipped in from the bunker at hole 17. And the commentator at the end basically was trying to say, apart from that shot that he had, he would have struggled to actually win the competition. So he just asked him, and he just said, that was a lucky shot you had at 17. And he said, yeah, he said, the more I practice, the luckier I become.
Yeah.
So this in fact is true even with the more we learn, the more we do, the better we become. The better we can come at identifying what the flies are that we're using, the more fish the more luck we will have.
Yeah.
That's a little bit for that. Let me also say, if you can identify the fly quicker, the hatch times are short. So you're in a much, much better position to get at least one or two fish rather than missing it completely.
I've been there, particularly on the Ask when it comes to March Brown hatches, that they can last as little as 5 to 10 minutes. Fish will be ravenous, but you gotta very, very quickly change whatever fly you were using before and trying to find the right imitation of the March Brown, because they're not taking the adult, they're taking the emerger, or they're taking the nymph.
Indeed. So the quicker you can figure out which one it is, the better. Okay. It's said that 90% of trout's food is taken from below the surface. Therefore, to identify the adult, you'll now know the nymph, which is another chalk stream technique, which is saying it's all to do with sight fishing. If you can see the trout and they're taking nymphs, and you see them move from position to take and come back, that is a very legitimate way of actually catching the chalk stream fish. And again, let me just harp on about this life cycle, because in the life cycle, if you know what type of water quality supports the river habitat that they need to live in, so you'll know where to find them, when they are active, and for how long they'll exist as a nymph and an adult.
Can you expand a little bit on that, Jan?
Yes, I'm gonna
just give us a couple of examples. And
okay, I was going to use the mayfly again, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine.
So it's called the Goldilocks area. So what we find is that the mayfly will dig into silt. Now, if that silt is fairly or relatively soft, as it digs through its tunnels, it will collapse in on itself, and therefore it won't find its proper habitat. If, for instance, it comes against compacted chalk stream bed of the river, it can't dig through, and as a result, again, can't find a place to live and exist. But there is that Goldilocks bit where it's just the right amount, and that's what, if you know where those areas are in the river, when particularly the mayfly are coming off, then that's a good place to start and to identify where you should.
So you're looking at structured silt rather than compacted.
For sure. And you don't want to see these big sides. If you can actually see silt rolling down the side of the stream as it's in it, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
And if you can see, well, basically fish reds, I would argue, because they dig a red out in there. That's probably too hard for.
And did you want to say something about the blue-winged olives, maybe?
Blue-winged olives, yes. Well, the blue-winged olives will have when they land, the eggs get dropped into the river, and they have little appendages. Sticky, yes. Yeah. And they will drop down, and they will find good, or should be in good, clean, fast-flowing water. This is riffles, and they will stay there and be in diapause. Diapause just basically means that they stay dormant. They don't start growing or anything until, say, about April, and then they start to grow out of the egg and then into little nymphs, and they live in that environment. So if you're looking, certainly in the latter part of this year, for where you would find blue-winged olives, look for the riffles.
And of course, the blue-winged olives, they're not only on chalk streams, they're on spate rivers, and of course, they follow exactly the same principles. So if I go into a new river, I'm not going to be looking into a very, very deep, slow-moving stretch. I'm going to be looking for a place where the river is kind of constricted, and there is the flow, all important for the blue-winged olives to drop their eggs, because
Correct.
The eggs need to be oxygenated, etc. So, and it's interesting that if you go into a new river, the good places for these places to be is on bridges, because bridges are said to be narrower, and the same thing happens on our water and elsewhere. But that's exactly what we're talking when we say where to find them, and do you want to say anything about the when to find them? I mean, what would you?
Well, as I had said already, basically you'll find that the nymph of the blue-winged olive will be starting around April, shall we say, but it'll then come off later in August, when it's actually in a more adult state that it's in, and then goes on, I think, until about late September.
I'll say, yeah, July and August is typically so. So what would you be if you wanted to fish for blue-winged olives now? Would you go in the morning, or would you go in the evening? That particular time.
Okay.
July or
now, probably I would go more in the morning than I would the evening.
Okay.
Having said that, as it becomes again the environmental temperatures and stuff affect you, when you get later in the evening, you'll have the spinnerfall, and then you want to be later with the blue-winged olive. And you probably want, if you know where they are in terms of the riffle where they were as nymphs, then you want to be looking further upstream, because they take that into account. They actually will fly further upstream to lay eggs, and then the eggs can drop down and so on. So knowing that's what you do, you've got a better chance of actually finding where.
And that's a classic that I will have members that they will come in the middle of a lovely summer's day. Sun is out, it's fantastic, nice and warm. Middle of the day, of course, the fish don't want to play ball. We cannot force them to play ball, because it's not in their nature. And I think in reality, they don't care about our worries. They don't care about our smart technology. And not many things have changed. So we just need to fit in with their schedule.
Yes, I think it's effective fishing time. Unfortunately, lots of people go to work and stuff, and they have different lives which take that, shall we say, that Goldilocks time. Again, I use that expression, but yeah, the more you get out to do it, the better it is, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Just to keep it fairly basic and the most obvious of all the identifiers that you have to tell what type of fly it is. Let's start off with the wings, and it's the positioning of the wings. So what we have here, mayflies, is a general generic type for all upwing flies.
So I would
We
say
call them mayfly.
upwing, I don't want to be pedantic, is when they're
Yes,
when the wings are okay,
yes.
like a sail.
Exactly. This is for you to identify them before they land on the water. Landing on the water, you'll find that their wings are on the cross, so they're spread open and can be all crumpled up and stuff, dependent upon the conditions at the time. But what you're looking at is if you can actually see a fly that has its wings on top of its back, that's a mayfly. That's probably, shall we say, 70 to 80% of all flies that we as anglers will
So
use.
just one thing, when we say mayfly, we're not talking the Danica, the mayfly, the big one that we know.
Right, correct. That for me is the English confusion. The Americans do it better with the green drake and the blue drake. But yes, the mayflies are classified as all upwing.
So
It's not just
it's a family. It's a
general-
family. in
It's
other
a
words.
family name.
Okay.
So now we look at the sedges. The sedges have got folded. Their wings lay across their back and they're folded. So if you see sedge,
Triangular, I would say. Yeah?
indeed, indeed. If you see that shape on the fly that you identify, then fair enough. That's what the sedge is. So we're just looking at one major identifier. So what you would do is if you saw them coming off and there were risers floating about where the roof, you could see they were roof, you wouldn't put on a mayfly. You wouldn't put on an upwing fly. You'd put on a sedge fly.
And the flight is very erratic as well.
Absolutely. And it can be, well, all sorts of flight patterns are occurring. If you look at maybe mayflies, they're more vertical and vertical up and down, if you like, whereas the sedges will probably be swirling
They
around
do.
and all.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And they just appear out of the blue because obviously I see the picture of the ascending pupa of Granum, and they're so fast, so they just appear. It's a cloud of Granum that appears out of the blue.
Yeah.
Versus the nymphs of the mayflies that they have to gradually make it to the top, and then the exoskeleton breaks, and then they're drifting downstream. So it's a more sort of kind of slow and orderly process.
The type of rise can tell you the type of fly as well, because as they're coming out, like as you say, exocets, there'll be a splashy rise.
Yeah.
That's not to say that doesn't happen with others, but sedge particularly. The next one are the crane flies, the gnats, and the midges. Well, their wings are flat on top. So if you look at a crane fly or gnats or the midges, that's exactly what they look like. And you can actually find that sometimes you'll find that the mayfly will be ignored rather than the gnat. Depends on the position and the place you are in the.
Have you seen that feeding habit changing over the years?
Definitely. Oh, without doubt. I think one of the big changes has been that the mayflies, the upwing flies, have reduced in numbers. That the gnats and midges have increased in numbers due to the water quality. Then there is definitely a trend, and you'll even get it in the publications. Midges are now a genuinely good fly to have. It's when to know. It's when to know to.
And gnats, you're referring to simulids, I
Yes.
presume?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Which is like a miniature, almost like a miniature housefly.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last one.
So these are the Griffiths gnats and the little tiny blackhead flies that they're sort of size 20 or 22.
Yes, and smaller.
And
so
smaller.
we then start looking at
Specsavers.
Yes, indeed we do. And the last one is stoneflies, where the wings are folded over. As a identifier for a stonefly, they tend to crawl out of the river on stones and leaves and stuff, so they don't have particularly a rise. The only stonefly I know which is pretty unique is America's salmon fly. And when those things come out, they're about 3 inches long, and you get out of the water, you don't want to be in with them.
Oh, I
But
see.
they,
Is that a willow fly by any
Yes.
chance?
yes.
Okay. And when do we get this? September time, I believe.
Actually, no, stoneflies you can get.
Well, about that willow fly.
Oh, that, yes,
At
probably
the back
September.
end of the season, yeah.
Okay. So the thing is, for you guys, I think if you want to know a little bit more about the flies that we use and the flies that are on our chalk streams, have a look at the SADC website. And if you look under club projects and then you look at chalk stream flies and artificials, that is a place where you could get a better. Oh, that didn't go.
It's okay. Can go
I
back.
hit the wrong one. That's
There you
right.
go.
Yeah.
You can share it now. Depending on how fast
Yeah,
the
take
link
a
is.
little
There
while.
you go.
Right. If you go through that process, as you can see in the top corner here, club projects, and click on there, you'll find that you come to these images of flies that we have on our chalk streams. And not all of this is completed yet. We're going through each one by one. But if I just double click on the mayfly,
No, just one clip would do.
oh, it might take a little while.
Yeah. Because
Yeah, here
they're
it comes.
very high.
Bill, our admin guy, has managed to give us some imitations that you could use.
Yeah.
All of which I would vouch for have actually caught trout on our SADC waters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know about getting
And
back out
we
of it.
covered some of these. We covered in the Mayfly webinar. We talked about the Jardine emerger. We talked about the very famous French partridge.
Yeah.
We talked about the grey wolf, etc. But I think that's very, very good quality work that Bill is doing, and we're just trying to enrich the library of the actual naturals with potential imitations to help members.
Did we lose it?
No. Okay. So we stop sharing.
We
All
do
right.
brilliant questions and answers.
So now I think we're ready. If you are with us, I see we've got 78 participants. We may want to take questions from yourselves. You can use the question and answer. Please go ahead and we will respond. I'll just ask the question. Everyone. No, I'm just sending a message. Please submit questions. Not sure what's happening there, and if we had a technical. Oh, there we are.
That's back.
Okay, right. So yes, please. I just use the chat line to please submit any questions you may have. We do have time. All right, there's a question come up now. How important is the damselfly to us on the rivers? That's a good one for you.
It is, isn't
because you're fishing both. I mean, I know where I would.
Well, you go ahead
Go
first.
for.
I'll let you go first.
Well, damselflies, they're typically, we're talking about slow moving water. We're talking about lakes in particular.
Yeah.
And if you look at damselflies and dragonflies, in the context of fishing elsewhere, New Zealand, for example, they're very important. But again, it's still water. You might get some dabs of flies, but it's not the, you might get the odd fish to take, but it's not the staple diet. In my experience, the key fly is what we call you call them the mayflies. I just call them the olives, because that's the staple. Because there's so many different varieties and they're hatching throughout the year. If you don't have the olives, then sport is getting quite tricky, because you've got the granum and that's fine, but the olives, they're throughout the year.
Yeah,
Would
so
you
I think,
agree?
yeah, definitely. So what we're saying there is that it's likely that, no, they're not in the top 10.
Okay, we've got another question, which is, which are your 3 best general purpose flies at our Saddock waters? Go on.
Okay. First of all, one of the number one is, what's his name? John Wyatt's emerger. That can imitate pretty much every mayfly.
John Wyatt's emerger.
Yeah.
You got me there. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's just a hair emerger. It's on an emerger hook.
Yep.
And it has a deer hair
Okay.
profile at the top, and then the hare's ear is just wrapped around it.
So it's a hare's ear emerger, essentially.
Yes, it's scruffy, but it's the profile and it's the size, and to me, it's one of those that you could use pretty much anywhere.
I've got the one fly for this. Well, I'm going to start one of the things that I've been experimenting over the years, and we had a lot of conversations, because we're very sad when it comes to trying to say, well, how do I imitate this, and how many legs has it got, etc. I found out that I've been using less materials, and I've been simplifying a lot of the typical recipes of fly tying. So, for example, I don't use dabbing anymore for olives. I just use a thread, small hooks, tiny hooks, 20, 22, simple thread, and just Cool de Canard, CDC, shuttlecock. So this flies, the tiny flies that I can tie in 2 minutes maybe.
Yep, that's fine, yeah.
Or an air fly. It covers the all-important occasion of the olives, once you get the olives. And you know, tested and working on our waters, certainly on the Usk. The other second fly which I would put there is the Griffiths gnat.
Okay.
And in fact, the Griffiths gnat, I don't use the peacock herald, I just use the grizzlecock. But it's even less. It's very thin. It's just a little tiny blob. And then you say, okay, well, does that work? Yes, I do. So it's not necessarily that a particular recipe, we just need to stick to it. It's just like cooking, I suppose. You know, you can improvise. But I found out that simplistic, impressionistic type of flies really work.
Agreed.
So third one, I would say, for a general search pattern, when we don't see a hatch and we're trying to prospect, not prospecting like a metronome, hit everywhere, you know, cast, because we put the fish down, but in the areas that we know that there might be a fish lurking, the general patterns I would vouch for Adams parachute, and also for clinkhammers as well as search patterns, particularly if the water is quite turbulent.
Okay, that sounds good. Hopefully that answers the question.
So what time of day should I go out? Can I catch things all day? There are times when you can do that, possibly in the early part of the season, when the temperature is not particularly cold, or particularly, you know, it's the balance between the atmospheric pressure and the water temperature. That's the thing. So here's an example. It's I was in Wales fishing in April, and it was really lovely, sunny weather. Sun doesn't really matter, and heat on that particular time of the year, because you have olives hatching, so they're quite happy. The trouble was that you had a northeasterly wind and the temperature was dropping below zero. So the fish, biologically, they weren't playing ball. They were just stuck there. Now, if the temperature was around, let's say, 12 to 14 degrees, it would have been a different story. So it's what I find is a combination between the external temperature and the water temperature. And I would say you can catch fish throughout the day. Typically, I would say in April, May, and then perhaps September, October. Once you're into the summer months, then things change.
Okay, I would give you a version that you could catch coarse fish during the morning. You could then go during the midday and at brighter periods go sea fishing with the fly. These are both on fly, and then in the evening fish for trout. So you could fish all day, but for different types of fish.
Yeah, that's fair play. Fair play. So what pattern represents the olives? Okay. Olive. Well, patterns.
Everything.
Yeah.
They've all
So
got
you
different.
have, you would have, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's the what's the spread one? Can't remember the name.
Well, Adams, you've got Adams to start with. Adams, the Hackle
Yeah.
Adams. That's an olive. Yeah, you've got so the Hackle olives in different colors of green, and then you've got obviously the CDC olives, yeah, Coul de Canal, and you've got, you know, so it could be a parachute, it could be a hackle fly, it could be a CDC fly, it could, and within that you could differentiate between a proper dry fly which sits on the water or an emerger.
Yeah, for me, I know that without doubt, certainly down at Stapleford, it sits in the surface and it's got the hair that you pull round.
Paradon.
No, not paradon. Comparadon. That's what it is. Comparadon.
We got
Comparadon
okay,
style for again all sizes.
Yeah,
they're perfect for olives too.
Yeah. Now, what you find is the truth is yes that in the majority of cases they'll be concentrating on emergers, and why? Because that's when they're very vulnerable, and that's when they choose to do.
Okay.
I find at mayfly time some rises to flies so small that I can't see. What are these likely to be? I would say midges. Yes. So yeah, typically, and what happens is that a lot of these fish, they're not necessarily trout, they're grayling. Grayling love small black things. So I would say I will put myself midges, because if it's an olive, you'll see it.
Yeah.
It might be small, but you will see it hatching.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay.
Here we go. Size is very important.
What fly size should I usually use? Okay, size we didn't cover. It's fundamental.
It is. I'll let you have the last word on that. But for me, I'd use obviously the size to match the natural. So if you've got a mayfly, then a size 10 because it's big. Having said that, I'd go down to a 12 now for mayfly, because they are actually becoming smaller. One of the things about them is we're thinking that they're changing from a 2-year life cycle at the riverbed, and females hatching and releasing all their eggs is now halved, because they're doing it every year. There's only about 6,000 eggs being dropped into the water. So I would argue that mayfly, I would start if you're not doing it already, at least carry a lower size.
Do you want to hear something? I
Yeah.
was a couple of weeks ago. I was fishing Loch Corrib. What I
Yes.
didn't know was, I mean, like they do have an extended life hatching period for mayflies, but the second hatch much smaller. So I wasn't
Oh,
aware,
okay.
but it's very similar to what happens, and they were like smaller than even the male. The male duns, mayfly duns,
Right.
that they're typically much smaller than the mayfly.
Okay.
So yeah, the tendency is there that
It's going to happen throughout. I think the nature that things are going to try and combat this
Yeah.
global warming and stuff.
Yeah. So anything else about the size? Because
Oh yes, I was going to leave it for you, but
well, the thing is that the you often hear the word microflies, or you're using microflies. Well, actually, there's no such thing as a microfly, and I think when my first impression when I saw the actual nymphs and the actual size of the duns hatching, and I realized how tiny they are. I was said to myself, what on earth was I doing fishing something which was probably 2 or 3 times the size of the fly?
indeed.
So commercial, there's another point there. So it goes to show the value of actually understanding, and I know that's something that you cover in your courses that you give, but also the fact that it's commercial ties that typically overdressed, although they're getting much better. So unless you try and attempt to do your own flies, it goes into that's the second part. I'm not saying everybody does it, but in my case, it opened up a totally new chapter in my fishing.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is to say that if you are fishing with a fly, the argument always says go smaller, so that
Totally.
if you're going to make sure you've got smaller versions of what they are. The only thing I can remember you fishing up at B18, you went higher with a big sedge in that pool by the
I did.
and that just goes to show it's nothing like of this is cut and dried. He didn't go smaller, he went bigger. It was on a frothy and vibrant surface. That's the only time I would say probably go for a bigger fly so that it can be seen in the water easier by the fish.
Yeah, it's what I call a quarter pounder.
Yeah.
But you cannot be always throwing a quarter pounder, because as we know now, the fish they had enough. There's the glut now. Why is it that they're into smuts and this and that and the other, and now they ignore mayflies? You get them mayflies, they ignore them.
There you go.
Okay, doke. So
What's it? When no fish are rising and no nymphs are allowed.
how do we catch trout?
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, you do. You can do. You can do. The thing is, again, it's not clear cut. I'll give you some examples. Early season, fishing the Wiley and down here the Avon. Nothing much is happening, and all of a sudden, what you see is daddies. You got crane flies, and you observe them on the water meadows, and it's a windy day. You put a daddy on, and you get fish to rise. Also, this is where prospective fishing can work. This is where the Adams parachute and the clink hammer, which I was, or even the sedge, can work in the early part. You can get fish to rise. Not in every rivers, but certainly on the Avon, it is yeah, absolutely, it can happen. And then, so typically you'll have a few casts on the areas that you suspect that they are suitable for a particular species, and then you wait for the rise. Now, of course, it's all dependent on the weather as well. That's the biggest thing, because if you go northeasterly or easterly, strong wind, forget it. If you have rain is not that bad. Rain, as long as it's not torrential rain, it really helps, I would say, if anything, because the flies stay on the water and they drift downstream because the wings haven't dried. So they'll be drifting, giving a fish the opportunity. But I think yes, it's not so nymph. Yeah, is the answer, if you like, but with nymph fishing essentially
It's not allowed. They said it's not
allowed. No, I
So
know,
I would,
I know. But all I'm saying, if behind the question is, well, why are we allowed to fish nymphs? That's because of
okay.
yep. That's I want to cover that angle because if we allowed nymph fishing at Durnford, well, we've got 2,500 visits.
Yeah.
Then the fish will be really regretting it, and we will be regretting it because it's going to be nigh impossible. So it's got its place in our armory, and there are some stretches where we do allow nymphing, of course.
Right.
Those stretches.
But if I'm answering that anonymous question, how do we catch trout? My argument would be patience, because at the end of the day, you just wait until it happens. And if you're an ultra purist, that's what they do as their main strategy. There's not fish rising all the time, all day, everywhere. It's just not the way of nature. So I think at the end of the day, you got to say to yourself, I'm not here at the right time.
Yes, which is typically the case because you and I have missed hatches by minutes. And we also had some fantastic fishing, only because we decided to stay an extra 10 or 15 minutes on the bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
You spoke about midges and how important they can be. As a newcomer to fly tying, are there any particular patterns you can suggest
You've said already
for Saddock Waters?
Yes. There's loads, but I think your Griffiths Nat is a classic.
It's a classic one.
There's
any black small parachute would work as well. So with a it can be a lot more visible by putting like a pink post or a white post, which the fish cannot see. But it has to be small. We're talking about sizes 20 to 24. There's midges that you can. I think the best if you went to Fulling Mill, and I'm not advertising here, but they do have a good selection. You'll see there's quite a few ranges of midges these days, a lot more than they used to be.
I'd go 100% with an F fly.
Or an F fly, black F fly.
Absolutely. I think that's and in various sizes, and you can choose then how and when to use those. But they're a very good fly. Another one I would argue is it ought to be outlawed, an IBO Humpy. It's an American fly, and again, it's just CDC really, but they are an excellent fly to use for midges.
Yeah. Okay.
This is what size?
What size Griffiths Nat for Stapleford on the Wiley? I would when I fish Griffiths Nats these days, I don't use anything bigger than size 20, to be honest. 20s, 22s, sometimes 18 will work, but again, we are fishing for gnats and or simulids, if you like, and midges. They're absolutely tiny. I wouldn't, I've seen some of our members. I've seen they gave me a size 28, 30 that's ever possible.
Yeah, I've tied a 28.
You've tied 28.
Yeah, with
Cool.
lots of magnification.
And then the interesting thing is, okay, well, can you see it on the water? No, you
No, you
can't.
can't.
Does it matter? No, because your fish the rise.
You'll see it.
That's the thing.
Or
It's
you'll
not what
see the
we,
line go as well.
it's not what we see, it's what the fish can see.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would say personally, I'll stop into sort of like size 22 because there's something else. You know, if a size 22 hooks is embedded in the mouth, you can't get it out. But it's a small, tiny hook, and if you've got a big mouth, it's kind of tricky whether you're going to set the hook or not, particularly if it's barbless. And most of these
Yeah,
midge imitations are barbless these days.
You'll like this one.
A finer spent olive,
Yeah.
which lies flat in the surface film, often does the business when I cannot work out what the fish are eating. Any thoughts on this? Do you think it is okay to fish a Robson's Daddy? Okay,
let's do the first one
Let's
first.
do the first one. And so I find a spent olive which lies flat in the surface film often does the business when I cannot work out what the fish are eating. Any thoughts on this? So we're talking about spent olive. We're talking about yeah, it would do the trick. It could be taken even as an emerger. It all depends. It could be taken as a cripple. It's something that, you know, it depends. Sometimes when I'm sort of perplexed, I may have used in the evening hours without seeing any flies, without seeing any spinners. But then again, it's the same thing about it. I don't know what fly it is. It's the same principle as a parachute in a way. Parachutes will be taken for spinners without being a specific spinner imitation. But
it doesn't say where he's fishing it. If it's underneath trees, for instance,
yeah, I don't
then
know.
that could be another.
Yeah.
However,
but if it works,
exactly. No,
yeah.
The thing is, it's easy food is the way to look at that. If it's spent.
Do you think it's okay to fish a Robson's Daddy when nothing is happening? I suppose it's it's a nondescript terrestrial tarantula. It's the quarter pounder plus, and there will be some fish that they'll be tempted. In the same way, if you fish, let's say you're in a big hatch pool and there are some big fish, particularly stockies. If you throw in a big sedge or some of these attractor patterns that they've got in the US, size 12 or 10.
We won't go into the mop fly. No. I did that once.
No,
anyway,
we don't do the mop fly.
No, we don't do the mop fly.
But it's okay. It will work. But it's not a fly that will catch everywhere. Yeah. I've got a little story there, which I'm not going to go into the extreme detail, but I was fishing with a member, the Ask, for brook dance, and I knew the fly that they were taking or they were going to take, and I had given my fellow member the right imitation for the brook dance. So brook dance started hatching, and we divided the river, and he was on the opposite bank, and I was fishing the near bank. And I started catching fish. I saw him casting nicely, covering the fish. Nothing was happening. And what had happened, he admitted that he had popped in Stockbridge and he got Robson's Daddy, and he was assured that he was going to catch fish everywhere. Well, he didn't catch a thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next. Okay. Okay. Are there any terrestrial patterns you would recommend for Saddle waters? Yes.
Definitely.
Say so.
Yeah. For me, particularly up at Eastleigh, I've used them, and that's the Hawthorn imitations. Anywhere that you can find the hawthorn trees, and then they don't have to be right on the river, they can be off them a bit, but it just depends on the wind. It is a very, very low chance situation, but yes, Terrestrial patterns for sure.
I
Without
find that
doubt.
black clinkhammers work extremely well for terrestrials. I know it's a generic imitation, but they work for me. So, or little, you can say tiny beetles as well.
Yeah, yeah, Sabat waters. Other waters I
But you need the trees,
yeah,
that's for sure, and you need the wind, you need the trees, and you need to be casting right underneath the trees. Terrestrials in summer, yeah, they got their place.
Ah, sorry, daddies.
Oh yeah, and that is, yeah.
Yeah.
Next question. Choice of fly or quality of presentation, which is more important? It's a nice one. Both are important.
I know. Okay. It depends. I'll do a quickie just off the top of my head.
Sure.
Here we go. If the waters are newly stocked, it doesn't matter on presentation. If you're in a situation where all you have to do is lift the rod up and the fish shoot away from you, then definitely it's the presentation.
I tend to think that it's a difficult one because
Yeah.
it depends on what sort of water. I tend to be more on the side of I'll give like presentation probably 60% and 40%.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It is important.
It is.
If you for wild fish, yeah.
Oh, for wild fish,
For
yeah.
wild fish. For if it's stockies or whatever, we're not touching
Exactly.
them.
If they know you're there, you're lost.
Yeah. How important is to master color for our dry flies?
I can give them a little story. My little story is when I first started with Cyril and I started my entomology, I was very, very imitative. And in fact, I went down to the color of their eyes. And what I did is I tied flies that were female and male, whether they were red or yellow.
You are sad.
I know sad. But yeah, what could I say? It didn't seem to make any difference to me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I was overdoing that.
Yeah.
But
well,
no, I didn't need to worry about the color of the eyes. But yes, there is a color.
There is some color, but I mean, again, there's this thinking that fish, the way they look from underneath, if you just hold your finger against the sun, it's all like almost black. So there is definitely something to do with the color. You have to have more or less the same color, but you don't need to be sort of so prescriptive.
No.
And I think what was happening when they had fantastic hatches in Halfords and Skews times, they went over, prescriptive. They were matching different hues, etc., because I suppose they were desperate. If you're dealing with a situation when you have a massive hatch, it's so difficult. So you're saying, well, is it my presentation? Is it my leader? Because I've decreased my leader. I've gone down to a 2-pound breaking strain. My presentation is good. What is not working? Is it the color? So, but I think, yeah, definitely you need to have more or less the right color. But I just don't think that a different shade of the color is very important. I see that black is working and khaki is working.
I'd probably say for nymphs though,
nymphs,
you can a touch of color somewhere or flash definitely is a trigger point for the fish.
Yeah, for nymphs.
The longevity I've found for a fly that does that though is short, because once one or two have been caught, they see this, and then I think it's a
time to change.
Yeah, it's time to change because you've given the fly away. They think it's dangerous.
Okay, next one. What pattern daddies would you recommend? I use the foam daddies personally because they float well, and you don't need to grease them or anything. Personally, I mean all daddies work, but I just use the foam daddies. Nothing big, sort of like, you know, I'll say it's 12s and 14s.
Oh, yes, 12 and 14s. Okay. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I say I use the
yeah.
foam daddies, which, by the way, and that's something which I think I mentioned in the previous webinar, they work extremely well for mayflies, the danicas, particularly as a spinner.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
right. Amazing discussion and knowledge share. Thank you. Thank you both so much for the wisdom. Can get back on the river. Okay. Now, I hear that you're, I think we're near the end. We don't have any more questions, I think. Oh, hold on. There's something more. Thank you both so much. With a dry, there's a question. Hold on, Jan. With a dry, hot spring and early summer, the fly life has been much more prolific, but there is not much evidence that the fish have responded to the extra food supply.
Yeah.
Please comment.
I'll comment in the fact that that's the problem. It is hot. They do find that I mean, although you want a beer or maybe an ice cream, you really don't want to be eating when you're in 30, well, for me, 30, 35 degrees. So I think that probably the temperature in the water is probably causing their oxygen levels to move about, will be drastically changed, and that would allow for their lethargy, if you like, in terms of, even though the food's there, they just can't be asked until they're okay. And water pressure and air pressure.
The one thing which I wanted to say is that so many things that we don't know.
Yeah.
And we're trying to apply our logic to try and the reasons why not or why yes. And definitely barometric pressure, definitely wind direction, definitely temperature, atmospheric temperature, water temperature play a role. But damn me, I remember a day fishing the Usk where there was a 3-hour continuous flotilla of March browns when the fish, they were hungry and we did not see a single rise. I don't know why. And we will not know why, because we don't know all the answers. So we need to accept that some things that we don't know, really. But it can happen. It happened this year. I was telling you again on the Usk, flies were hatching. Typically, the fish will be grabbing them. But what we attributed it to was that the water temperature was very low. And it was low. It was 8 degrees, as I took the temperature.
Right.
So, there's a few more. Okay. Informative session. Thank you. Is there a place for hoppers on the rivers?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely, totally. I mean, one of I fished the Meon, and down the bottom end of the Meon, there's a field there where I walk through it, and the grasshoppers fly in. They get themselves knocked in and blown in onto the rivers, and sure enough, they take in America. I mean, America is one of the places where that's exactly the opportunistic fly there is. Definitely.
So we've got, how do I get a copy of this webinar, please? Listen to whilst working and couldn't give all my full attention. That's been brilliant. Thank you. Not to worry, Henry. We will put it swiftly on our forum under the topic webinars. It will be available, I would say, this week. Bill will do it because it's been recorded. And I think, last but not least, you're organizing some workshops out here.
Indeed. There's a workshop on the 16th of July, and there's another one on the 27th of September.
How many participants?
6 maximum, but I think to begin with, maybe 5. And it's going to have to be the first 5 that sign up and do the business on the website. So
so what we'll do then, once we put the webinar recording on the forum and the webinar, we're going to put a link.
Yeah.
So members can book those 2 workshops, and it will be on a first come first served basis.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Andreas.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope we didn't bore you, and have a good evening. And I'm not sure what happened with the football.
Well, I've got it recorded, so I don't want anyone telling me. So,
All right. Have a good evening.
cheers.
Thank you for participating. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.